Hey there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and I'm here to do the mid-year freakout tag one more time. So I cannot believe we are halfway through the year and I've got the questions here and I'm going to answer them. But before I do, I just want to start by having one word to describe my reading taste this year. And I think this is a bit of a tradition I would like to continue going forwards. But the best way that I could describe my reading year so far has been deeply unserious. Unserious is my word. I tend to really like sad books. I tend to really like heavy books. And while I've read a few of those this year, I've mostly been reading like fluffy, light-hearted things, rereading things that I really like, or just reading things that make me happy. And so I feel like my reading hasn't gotten very deep in terms of like the thematic things or the representation or the heavy grief reads and the ones that could make me cry. Emotionally, I'm on my character development arc this year and a lot has been happening, and so when I've been reaching for books, I've been reaching for things that are comforting, things that make me happy, things that can just give me a bit of a break from everything else that's happening in my life. But without further ado, let's get down to the questions. So the first question is the best book you've read so far this year in 2024, and one of the best books that I've read so far this year is The Perseverance by Raymond Antrobus. Yes, my favourite book so far is a poetry collection. This is a poetry collection by a British Jamaican black deaf poet, and when I read this collection I just learned so much about deaf culture and history and life, and I learned so much about Raymond's relationship with his father, with his Jamaican culture, with his blackness, and it was just so good to see all of those things integrating and being intersectional within this collection. I love his writing style, the way that he manages to be so direct and so simplistic while deploying all of the literary devices and metaphors and stylistic choices that you enjoy seeing in poetry. He manages to balance that all in this poetry collection, and I think it's one of the things that I most enjoyed reading this year so far. The next question is the best sequel you've read in 2024 so far, and I chose two answers to this question because the first one is not technically a sequel, it's a prequel, but I'm still counting it, and that is Salt in the Wound by Simone, which is the prequel to Salt Kiss but comes and was published after Salt Kiss. This prequel is free on Kindle and it does a masterful thing where if you read Salt Kiss, which is a BDSM kinky retelling of the Irish Tristan and Isolde myth, you then see how that first book ends, how Salt Kiss ends, and it kind of ends on a cliffhanger with really high stakes, and then you read this prequel, and because of the events of what happens in the prequel with an entirely different couple, you understand why the cliffhanger is so suspenseful, and it raises the stakes even more and makes you want that second book that is publishing in June this month even more. And so I think it was like masterfully done and very clever and such a good sequel. And the other sequel that I really liked and I chose for this question was also Ravensong by TJ Klune, and I read this Wolfsong duology earlier this year around January time and I absolutely fell in love with it. I lost sleep over this book. I also lost sleep over Salt in the Wound, to be honest. Lost a lot of sleep this year so far, but yes, I lost sleep over Ravensong. It was the sequel to Wolfsong and it continued on with being this series about these werewolf pack who act as a found family and the humans that like move in next door to them, and there's a lot of fights that go down, but ultimately it's also like a love story and a found family at its core, and it is so heartwarming while at the same time actually having a plot to it as well. And Ravensong followed some characters that I particularly loved and did such a good job of continuing on the story and just furthering everything that I loved about book one into book two, so it made it a jolly good sequel. Which aptly leads me into a new release that's come out this year that you really want to read and you haven't read yet, and I tried not to duplicate answers, but the truth of the matter is Heartsong by TJ Klune is one that I really want to read soon. It's the third book in the series and it came out this year, and what makes me want to read it all the more is the cutest thing that my best friend said, which is that she doesn't want to read the finale, which is coming out in a couple of months, before I read book three because she wants to discuss book three with me and then we can both read the last book. And she didn't tell me this until I was like, why have you not read the last book yet? Like, why have you not started reading further? And she was just like, I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to pressure you into reading it but I'm waiting for you. That was so sweet. So that is something I definitely need to and want to read soon. So the next question is my most anticipated read for the second half of the year, my most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and that was easy. It's my most anticipated release for the entire year. It's not out yet, and that is Little Rot by Akwaeke Emezi. I'm very, very excited for this. I love everything that I've read by Akwaeke Emezi so far, and they can do no wrong. This looks like it's their delve into the literary thriller genre. I have a proof of it. I'm going on holiday tomorrow and I'm taking it with me, and so maybe I'll be able to read my anticipated release for the second half of the year before the second half of the year is done. The next question is my biggest disappointment so far this year, and I'm going to give it to The Boy in the Black Suit by Jason Reynolds, which I did a reading vlog as I was reading it, and this is simply the biggest disappointment because I tend to really love Jason Reynolds books. I really liked his novel in verse, I really liked most of the track series, I really liked Oxygen Mask. I can keep counting. There are multiple Jason Reynolds books I've really, really loved. So for me to be not liking one and not digging it at all is just a big disappointment to me. I felt like this one started off very strong but just didn't tie up, and the story meandered and it drifted away from the synopsis that we started with and the point of the story, and just whittled down to being a love story, and I wasn't really here for that. I wanted to see the grief storyline develop, I wanted to see the father-son relationship develop, and so I was quite disappointed in this one because it's supposed to be all about this young black boy whose mother passes away and he starts to work at a funeral home to kind of help him process his grief, and it was supposed to be all about that, and it wasn't. The biggest surprise for me this year, I have to say, is Mr. Loverman by Bernadine Evaristo. So I used to talk more about the fact that I used to say 3 strikes and you're out for an author. I would give them 3 chances, and I don't do that anymore. It's more so 2. I like to give authors 2 chances, and that's because of my history with Maggie Stiefvater, where I read a series of hers and I absolutely hated it, and I gave her a second chance, and that is one of my favourite series of all time. So I tend to give authors 2 chances, and this year I gave Bernadine Evaristo her second chance after I felt very mediocre about Girl, Woman, Other. And so my biggest surprise was Mr. Loverman, which I read and I absolutely loved. It is so very good. It's a literary fiction book about a black man who's elderly. He's in a marriage that he does not care about. He has daughters, but most importantly, he is a closeted gay man who has a lover in his best friend, and he has kept that secret for years and years and years, and he's decided, or he's trying to live more authentically, but of course this will disrupt his family life, his business, his stability, and it's all about that. He's quite an unlikable character, which makes this all the more surprising because I don't tend to get along very well with unlikable characters. I don't tend to get along very well with cheating in books, and yet I absolutely loved this one. I think it did a great job of talking about the black queer community. I think it did a great job of talking about what it means to be elderly, and also elderly and queer. I think it does a wonderful job of depicting his relationship to his culture, because he's an islander, and what it's like to be a British islander now, and it manages to, in the text itself, code switch depending on what is being talked about or the situation and circumstance, and I just thought it was geniusly done, and kudos to Bernadine Evaristo for writing such a good book. I will definitely read more Bernadine Evaristo now, and I'm so glad that I continue to give authors second chances. So I'm cheating a little bit because the next question is your new favourite author, whether that's new to you or like your first time reading them, and this author's not entirely new to me because I started reading her books last year, but this is the only author I've read this year who I can say is like a favourite author, like made it to my favourite author list, and that is, as you may be able to predict, Sarah Simone. I've just been loving Sarah Simone's books. I've never read this many books by a single author in a year's time. I have read more than like 2 books by her every single month so far this year. We are 6 months in and I have not slowed down. I am just immersed in them. I'm loving them. They are often romance, sometimes they are polyamorous, sometimes they are BDSM. They are always super steamy, and they're just for me. They're just for me. I like the tropes that she touches on. She often intersects steamy scenes with religious themes, which seems to do it for me. Who knew? She loves a good age gap. She loves a good almost fanficky situation set up to their romance, and she writes across the different genres. They're all romance, but there's like fantasy books where there's actually a fantasy plot, like the Merlin retelling of American Queen. There's the Priest series where it's all about like forbidden romances within religious systems, the Lioness series, which is a spin-off of American Queen. I am devouring it all and I'm having the best time working my way through her works. The next question is your newest fictional crush. I don't tend to add characters to my fictional crush list too much anymore. I think it takes a lot for you to be worthy of being a book boyfriend to me now, but there is one person who came up on this list this year, and I'm so sorry to repeat myself, but it's Gordo Livingstone from the Green Creek series by TJ Klune. If I describe Gordo Livingstone to you, you'll quickly be able to see why he's been added to my list. He's a little grumpy man who doesn't say much, and when he does, he probably is growling at you. He runs a mechanic. I tend to have a thing for mechanic characters. He is somebody who looks really hard on the outside but is soft on the inside. I tend to really like that as well. Like, there's just so many ways that I love Gordo Livingstone. I feel like Gordo Livingstone is if you smush Adam Parrish's personality with Ronan Lynch's, pop them into one, and then make them into a middle-aged adult, and you get Gordo. The only unfortunate thing is that Gordo is very gay and would never be my book boyfriend, but girl can imagine. Newest favorite character, so this is not boyfriend material but a character that you love, and for this I'm going with Araya from The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent, which is probably what I can safely say is my favorite romantasy book. If you put vampires in it and give me some good writing and some suspense, I will be there, and Araya was a character I absolutely adored. I really liked her. She's been raised to live in a certain way, which is by never letting anybody get close to her because she's a human in a world of vampires. She's always on guard, she's always trying to be one step ahead of you, and she's just so protective of herself and her feelings, and I loved her. I loved her for that. I loved her for how reserved she was, for how ruthless she was, for how strong she was, and for how she manages her way all through that book in such a dangerous situation. And some of the things that she's learned about herself and about her upbringing and about her vampires changes as you read the book, and I just loved seeing how she reacted to all of those changes and how she took them on board. She is portrayed as a very human character, a very realistic character, but also you can see where she has more claws than maybe the average person does, and so I really liked Araya. And it's also nice to see a main character whose name starts with an O that is not Olivia. These next questions were the ones I found the hardest to answer. So for a book that made you cry, I really struggled because I hadn't read many sad books, but I do have two books that were on the level of best book I've read so far this year, and one of them is Sing If You Can't Dance by Alexia Casale, and I decided to put it here for a book that made me cry because I do not cry when I read a book, but if I could cry happy tears at reading a book, I would have at the end of this. I was internally sobbing in happiness by the time that I put this book down. So Sing If You Can't Dance follows Ven, our main character, who has been practicing and is part of a dance group, and she has plans, she's on the trajectory to become a professional dancer in her life. However, when she's on TV dancing with a group, she suddenly collapses, and when she wakes up she discovers that she has a chronic illness. They're struggling to diagnose it throughout the course of this book, but it comes with a lot of things. Her joints very easily dislocate, and because of that she's not going to be able to dance again. Dancing is completely off the table with her condition, and so it's about what she chooses to do now that she can't dance, and the title may give some of it away, but a lot of this is about her journey. What I particularly appreciated about this book is that she doesn't spend a lot of time in that self-loathing headspace, and I just really loved that about this book, how refreshing it felt, how good it was for its disability rep and for seeing how it handled those topics. I especially liked how the parenting was done, the relationship with her and her best friend, and the relationship with the new boy in school who she comes across. I think it just handled a bunch of topics very, very well, especially when it came to talking about privilege and who has privilege. Even if you may be like disabled, you can still have privilege in other ways. So it was just fantastically done and hit quite close to home with some of the things that I experienced growing up with my disabled sibling. So because of the fact that it hit very close to my own personal experience in some ways, and I was seeing that on the page and how everything came together at the end, I was feeling a bit emotional and in my feelings. And so that's the book that made me internally cry. And then for a book that made me happy, I had so many options because I've read a lot of happy books this year so far, and maybe my choice is a bit unconventional because the book that has made me really happy this year is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is because it's a well-known classic, a gothic classic that I have been meaning to read for a very, very long time, and I finally read it, and that made me happy. And also I really enjoyed it, and therefore it made me happy again because I got to read a renowned gothic classic. I got back into my classic reading this year, and it was everything that I wanted it to be. This one is about a young man who's really gorgeous, and he gets a portrait painted of him, and he wishes that he would never age and that the painting would instead, and when that wish is granted, it also has some sinister consequences to it. And it was just so nice to see the spiral of everything that happens and how it has that gothic crescendo of things slowly building up and becoming more and more sinister, and then you get to the end and everything just spirals out of control. That dark descent, I love it. It's beautiful to see. The most beautiful book that I bought so far this year, so I recently became a subscription box person. For the first time ever, I signed up to Evernight, and I really wanted it because of the Invocations by Krystal Sutherland. They did such a stunning edition of that. The cover recreation is gorgeous, the skeleton sprayed edge is amazing, under the dust jacket looks gorgeous. I definitely think the Evernight books are some of the most beautiful ones that I've gotten so far this year, but in particular the Invocations is just stunning. The next question is, are there any books that you need to read by the end of the year? And I've chosen 3. So one of the ones I need to read by the end of the year is The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This is a horror book. I'm reading it with my Patreon book club, so that's definitely going to get read. It's also a nice chunky horror, but it's historical horror. It's got something to do with like black teenagers in a boarding school and their ghosts, and everybody who's read it has loved it. I have not heard a single negative thing about this book, and so I'm very much looking forward to sinking my teeth into it myself. The second book I need to read this year is Husband Material by Alexis Hall, and that is because we have an upcoming video coming where I read my best friend's favourite book and she reads one of my favourite books and we swap books. We've done this before and that went very, very well. It was a couple of years ago. I'll leave a link to it down below, and I can't remember if I wanted to do it again or if she wanted to do it again, but we are once again swapping books, and I won't tell you what I chose for her, but what she chose for me is Husband Material. So I definitely need to read it by the end of July when she is here with me in the UK and we're filming part 2 of that video. The other book that I chose that I need to read by the end of the year is Greywaren by Maggie Stiefvater. It just needs to happen now. Like, I need to cross the bridge, and I know I'm delaying finishing this series because I don't want to say goodbye to this world. I understand that about myself, but at some point you gotta pull the plug. You just gotta rip off the plaster. I even started it this year. I packed it for my holiday too. So I'm getting there. I am getting there. New channel to you, like a channel you're watching and really enjoying, who's new to you, and I think it's this year I discovered Chanel Chapters, where Chanel talks about books, and I've been loving her channel. She is really great. I really am impressed by her DNF skills. I know a lot of you have said that I am inspiring with how much I DNF, but the level of DNFing that I do is nothing compared to Chanel. She is the master at DNFing, and I find it so inspiring. And she also sometimes shows like cafes in Melbourne, and I did a year abroad in Melbourne and I kind of miss it sometimes, so getting to see like the cafe culture again is really heartwarming for me, and it's always interesting to hear what she thinks of books. So yeah, I've really been loving Chanel's vlogs and channel, and I highly recommend, and I'll leave a link to her channel down below. But that is it. Those are all of the questions in the mid-year book tag. Let me know in the comment section down below what is the best book you've read so far this year. I would love to know that. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!